Okay, now on to the presentation. That is me. He's not going to wave at you or anything. It's not Jurassic Park, but that's me in Glendive, Montana. All right, and I was standing at a dig site of a dinosaur excavation. All right, we had to travel about 25 minutes off-road just to get to this site. Now, what we had there were about 7 guys, guys from Montana, Colorado, Texas, and me in Sweet Home, Alabama. And we were all there, lived there for about 10 days, out there with no running water and tents. So you got 7 guys, no running water, working in the dirt all day, excavating a dinosaur. No showers. Have you ever worked all day long and not taken in the dirt, in the mud, and not taking a shower before you've gone to bed? And then do that for 10 days? That's the first day. I was nice and clean. And happy and everything. Okay? And, well, put it this way. We just discovered all kinds of new smells. All right? Now, this is the picture from the base camp at the site. So, and the dinosaur was right on top of that ridge. So it's right up here. Okay, so we had to climb that ridge. And one of the first things we did is we dug stairs out of the side of that cliff kind of face to get to it. Because the dinosaur just did not die in a convenient place. But we had to climb up there every single day. Now, this is the actual dig area. The tent, we put a tent, over the fossil. And we do this for 2 reasons. One, to protect what we're uncovering from the elements. Because when any kind of water comes down, any kind of rain comes down, it remaps everything. And so and when you're doing actually excavation of fossils, you have to prepare for an unknown rain coming, because if the rain comes, it's gone. Water remaps everything. And 2, it's a hot, dry, arid heat, and we didn't want to get dehydrated. We dug drainage ditches right out of the gate because of water. Again, water is a disaster if you're trying to preserve what you're uncovering. Now, the type of dinosaur that we were excavating was a type of ceratops. Now, we have all heard of the creature, the Triceratops, which means a 3-horned face. Now, and this is on display in the Glendive Dinosaur and Fossil Museum. Now, most people don't know that the Triceratops is just a juvenile version of a Torosaurus. And the vast, vast many species of dinosaurs that are claimed, really, a lot of them are just the exact same creature at different ages. Okay, you get baby, adolescent, adult. They're just at different ages. Now, our Ceratops was not a Triceratops because it had some real unique frill features. And this is him. His name is Big John. Big because if you measure him, he was 34 feet from nose to tail, which is a huge Ceratops. I mean, a biggin. All right? John, because that was the name of the guy who found him. Okay, that's how it works in the dinosaur world. All right, if you go find your own dinosaur, you can name him Dinosaur Timmy. I mean, it doesn't matter. That's you get to name him. Now, we excavated a little bit over 60% of him, which is a really good find. And the fossil was not articulated. Okay, that means he wasn't all nice and neat put together. It wasn't like a painting that we're looking at. Okay, it was associated. They were all in the same area, but it was discombobulated. Now, one of the reasons he was probably broken apart so much before he was consumed by the mud and the waters that would have fossilized him is that we found this right in there. All right, it's a raptor tooth. It broken off right in the middle of it. And so he was being scavenged. He was being broken apart, and so that's why he was broken. It's just that was really, we loved the Ceratops, but finding that was also just wicked cool, right? Now this is what Big John was, what he looked like basically. That's the kind of parts he was in. Now that part is about yay big to get an idea, and it's part of the rib process connecting to the spine. So it's about that big. And you see you see how the fossil in the middle is embedded in rock? Now what I did, why that's a little bit shiny, and you are able to see that, is that I put polyvinyl acetate on it, and it's a solution that gums up the fossil so it doesn't break apart as well. Because fossils, a lot of fossils, when they first come out of the ground, are extremely fragile. And this guy was kind of crumbly, in fact. So we really had to work hard to preserve him. Now, so to get this, we have to carefully chisel this thing out of the ground And to actually get the fossil out of it, we don't do it out in the field because it's too dangerous. You risk too much harm to the fossil. So we put them in things like this. It's a plaster cast, and we put it and we protect it until it gets to the lab. Now, obviously, it's just if you break an arm or you break a face or whatever, you put a cast on. All right, and so just like us, we have casts, and that's basically what that is. Now, once these things are at the lab, they piece it together and they fill in the missing pieces of bone because we only found about 60% of them with, other knowledge. We know what a rib does and things like that. And then they make a cast and they sell the cast to museum. A lot of times in the museums, what you're seeing there is not necessarily the real fossil, it is a mold. And it's because the fossils are just simply, they're too valuable. And a cast like this would cost, last time I checked, about $80,000 for a museum to buy. So, and the reason why is so few people do this, and so few people are able to take it from the ground to completion. So it's a very hard task. Paleontology is extremely difficult to do, and to get all this out, it's a lot of work. Now, how do we know what these creatures look like besides the skeleton? Have you ever asked yourself that? I mean, we're not seeing the belly, we're not seeing the organs. How do we really know what it looks like? Because we've all seen pretty pictures of these things. Well, this is a cast of fossilized ceratopsian skin. So sometimes in very, very rare situations, even the skin is fossilized. And this is hard evidence for the nature of these creatures. All right, they were very scaly creatures. Now here's another part. This is a fossilized skin of a theropod, and therefore we know that these creatures were very scaly. They're very crocodilian in their exterior. This is not conjecture. We know what they were on the outside. So here's the million-dollar question that everyone has to ask themselves, is when did Big John and the other dinosaurs live? Evolutionists are going to demand that they died out 65 million years ago, but a straightforward reading of the Bible does not give us that option. Exodus 20:11, for in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that is in them, and rested the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and called it holy. Okay, God then further qualified what those days were in Genesis by saying that each had an evening and a morning. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and the evening and the morning were the first day. You see, a day is measured by the rotation of the earth, so a day is a 24-hour period. And he gave us specific records on what he did on those days. Okay, day 1, space, earth, time, water, and light. Day 2, atmosphere. Day 3, land and vegetation. Day 4, sun, moon, and stars. Day 5 was the first animal life, sea creatures and flying creatures. And then day 6, and God made the beasts of the earth after their kind, and cattle after their kind, and everything that creepeth upon the earth after their kind, and God saw that it was good. Dinosaurs are land creatures, so biblically they were created on day 6. The Bible does not give us any other indication that land creatures were alive in some assumed prehistoric period. There was never a time when dinosaurs ruled the planet. Okay? And God said, let us make man in our image. That was also on day 6. So, biblically speaking, man and dinosaur together on day 6 of creation. And did you know that the Bible is absolutely the history of our universe from the very beginning? If we add up all the genealogies in our Bible, okay, we're just roughly about 6,000 years old. So the question all of us have to ask is, are we willing to take the Bible at face value? Even though secular academia is going to demand, and they're very vocal about, that they died out 64 million years ago, are we willing to accept that the Holy Spirit is more knowledgeable than we are on these matters of history? And it really comes down to, who is your authority? Is it the Word of God or is it the Word of man? And this is really a matter of conviction, and all of us have to reach a point in our lives where we ask ourselves, where does our lie? Where does our conviction lie? Now, however, if dinosaurs walked with man, then evolution has a massive problem. Massive. Louis Jacobs, former president of the Society of Vertebrate Paleontology, said this about man and dinosaurs living together at the same time. He said, co-occurrence of men and dinosaurs. Such an association would dispel an earth with vast antiquity. The entire history of creation, including the day of rest, could be accommodated in the 7 biblical days of the Genesis myth. evolution would be vanquished. Now, first notice the bias against Genesis. All right? He says, and last time I checked, he's not a believer. He's an evolutionist. That could have changed, but I think he's still an evolutionist. But he calls Genesis a myth, so he doesn't believe in it. But then he concedes a huge point. He says, you know something, though, but if man and dinosaur could be shown, could be proved to coexist, evolution would be vanquished. Man, that is a huge concession for him. Why is it that he would make such a concession? And I think the reason is this, is that so much of the evolutionary tale is built on these millions and millions and millions of years. You know, it's built on these fossil records and these millions of years. And if we show that man and dinosaur were contemporaries, that their millions of years just collapsed like a concordion. And he realized, he's like, then evolution's done. It is over. So what we're going to talk about today is a huge deal, both for the biblical faith and also the evolutionary faith. And what we're going to talk about is dinosaur historicity. And we're going to explore the topic of man and dinosaur coexistence through what I call this. And that means looking at the dinosaur through the eyes of real, authentic, tangible history. Not make-believe history, not make-believe prehistory. I'm talking about the real thing. Now, to explain closer, I want to look at this term prehistoric era, and ask ourselves, it's interesting, what is history? Or what do we know about history? History is a record of our existence, okay? History occurs when someone witnesses something, writes it down, and then passes it on. So what would prehistory be? Before there is a record of existence. It's a fascinating idea. Is they're actually coming out and saying there's a prehistoric time of which we have no record of. If we had a record of it, it would be historic. And yet all these incredible creatures lived in a place that we have no record of. It's just a fascinating play on words that they're doing. Now, of course, the Bible says there is no prehistoric time. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The Bible gives us our written history from the very beginning. A prehistoric time has never existed according to the Bible. God has provided a record for us from the beginning. He was never going to leave us in the dark. Think about how complete our biblical worldview is because of the graciousness of God to say, I am going to tell you everything from the beginning because I'm the one that witnessed it. But the evolutionists who reject the Bible, and there are many, obviously, they're inventing a prehistory with sheer imagination that remakes us the image of chaos and chance. So even though this prehistoric era doesn't exist, it doesn't stop them from claiming a prehistoric era. So how are they claiming this prehistoric era? What is their record? This picture is from the Badlands in South Dakota, and you can see the definite lines in that rock formation. You know, evolutionists treat rock layers as long ages of history. Therefore, something that is buried at the bottom, they conclude is something that is much, much older than something that is buried at the top, even millions of years. This is their historical record that they're trying to claim. Now, a British man by the name of Charles Lyell is the one that popularized this idea. It's called uniformitarianism. Now, it's critical to understand something about Lyell. Okay? He wrote in a letter that he was trying to free the sciences from Moses. That was his goal. We document this in a DVD. What is freeing the sciences from Moses? It's freeing people from the Old Testament. Okay, actually from the Torah, to be more precise. Okay, he has a bias against that, and he is now trying to, and how do you free people from the Torah? Well, you claim the history is not true, and there you have it. Now, if you take this idea, and so he thought these layers, represent millions and millions of years. Now, if you take his idea that each one of those layers is a vast amount of times, what would you conclude if you look at the Grand Canyon? I mean, you see all the layers there. It's impossible to count all the strata. It's just too grand, okay? But if you believe each one of those layers represents a big, vast amount of time, you're going to look at that and go, oh man, we're billions of years old. So understanding uniformitarianism is critical to understanding evolution because Darwin leaned heavily on Lyell to give himself enough time for his evolutionary, basically for his evolutionary theory to go forward. He needed millions and billions of years for slow, gradual processes. The two are inextricable. They're tied together. Now, is there evidence against the rock layers being an accurate column of history? Many of you have probably seen this. In May of 1980, or heard this. Mount St. Helens erupted in the state of Washington. This was one of the most documented geological events because the mountain was swelling beforehand, so everyone knew it was going to blow. And so geologists from around the world came and set up cameras, and they're like, we're going to watch this thing happen. And when it erupted, it provided geology in real time. Geologists didn't have to speculate on what might have happened. They saw the whole show. They just sat back and nature gave the lesson. Now, this cliff face was created at 3 different events stemming from Mount St. Helens. There's a person at the bottom for scale, so you can see. Now, what we're interested in is this 20-foot section that's highlighted. All right? The highlight is important because you see all the layers there. You see those things in the rock. If you were just going to come up there and you had Lyell's idea of uniformitarianism and that all these things take a long time, you're like, wow, that's thousands, hundreds, thousands, maybe millions of years old to create all those layers. The problem with that is on June 12, 1980, that 20 feet was deposited in only 3 hours. Just 3 hours. Okay, so the concept that layers mean huge, vast amount of time, it just doesn't work. All right, it doesn't mean that. We have evidence of that. Now, even the fine micro layers, and each of those layers were thought to take, maybe like a year to form. Those paper-thin layers you see, the idea is 6 months or a year, it would take that to form. Yet 20 feet of that stuff happened in 3 hours. So again, the evidence doesn't fit their model when you actually can see something from the beginning to the end. And that's the key. Can we witness something start and witness it finish? And when you can do that, you can figure it out. But what's happening is they're not witnessing how anything began. They're just saying, this is how it came. But how do we know that for sure? Now, what's interesting is in laboratory experiments, when air and water is circulated with sediment and mud and dirt, and it settles, they create the same kind of micro-layering. So again, when you see layers in nature, the point is, it doesn't necessarily mean millions and billions of years. All it is circumstance. What happens here is as water is being circulated with the sediment, these little rocks are tumbling over each other, and they're just simply segregating each other on size and weight. It's just not that big of a deal. They just segregate each other as they're tumbling around. Now, when you look at all of the fossil layers and all the layers that is found all around the globe, what could have created the circumstance where you have dirt, mud, and water all just churning around and resettling? Noah's flood. And the Bible actually explains the fossil layers. It explains the geological layers very, very well. Now, go back to Big John here. This is the dinosaur fossil embedded in a rock. Lift this up. So, what they do, and when they're trying to date these dinosaurs, they figure out what layer that rock is in. And then based on their idea of how old that rock is, based on the layer, then they associate the dinosaur with that. So they believe that rock is 65 million years old, and there's a dinosaur bone embedded in that. Okay? They're going to assume the dinosaur bone is 65 million years old. So that's how they connect it. Now, sometimes they identify the rock layers by the dinosaur bones, the dinosaur fossils. But that's circular reasoning. All right, but that is what they, I just want to get you an idea. That is where they go. But we know there's reason to doubt it. We know there's reason to doubt how they're aging those sedimentary rocks. But refuting is one thing, or giving a possible explanation of why they're wrong is one thing. Giving hard evidence that supports our biblical view is quite another. And that's what we're going to do. Okay? And we're going to go through, and we're going to look at theology. We're going to look at oral history. We're going to look at mythology. We're going to look at paleontology. We're going to look at archaeology, and we're going to look at written history. When I did this project, my starting hypothesis, I hate calling it that, but my starting hypothesis, the Bible, if the Bible is true, dinosaurs were created on day 6, therefore man would have left a record of dinosaurs. It's that simple. Because dinosaurs they're huge. If man's going to see these things, they're going to pass down records of them. Now, what's fascinating is the evolutionists, because they don't believe that man and dinosaur ever coexisted, they never consult these disciplines of our history. Because they're like, man never saw them. They don't go looking for answers. It's not there. So our method is actually pretty good because we're like, something, we're not leaving anything unturned. we're going to look at all of the history and see what we see. In the year 1822, a man named Gideon Mantell was said to discover the first dinosaur. It was a tooth of an iguanodon. According to secular science, this was the first time man ever knew that large-scale giant reptile ever inhabited the earth. So this is a critical point, 1822. So what they're saying is before 1822, the largest creature we knew about were just whales and elephants. We had no idea dinosaurs were around. And did you know the word dinosaur was not even invented until 1841? So the word is a relatively new English word. So if man and dinosaurs did coexist before 1841, it would not have been called dinosaurs because the word wasn't there. So we're going to start out with the most speculation, mythology. All right? One of the fascinating creatures in mythology is the dragon. Some dragon legends are sensational. Some have extraordinary godlike powers associated to them. And the Chinese very much hyped all kinds of powers onto this dragon. But not all dragon legends are like that, and that's the critical thing here. In fact, if you scrape away all the sensationalism and just deal with the creature at the base of the legends, a very common sounding creature is described. In fact, Carol Rose, an expert in mythology, defined what is the general physical description of a creature called a dragon in ancient mythology. And she wrote this: the most general description of the Occidental dragon is very similar to that of the Oriental dragon, Occidental being European. Being an enormous, elongated, scale-covered body like that of a crocodile, often with vast wings like those of a bat, having huge legs like those of a lizard with long claws. It may have a toothed dorsal ridge extending to a long serpentine tail, usually barbed. Its head may be like that of a vast lizard or crocodile, but either a crest or horns on the head. Now, if you know your dinosaurs, that's a nearly perfect composite image of a whole bunch of dinosaurs put together with a pterosaur thrown into the mix. Pterosaur being the bat-like wings. Look at this picture. At the Creation Museum in Kentucky, they have this pterosaur there, and I took a picture of it because what you see here is a description of dragons have bat-like wings. I want you to look at what the pterosaur is. I think you can see it. You have membrane wings, you have joint structures, you have claws out of the top. Even the posture and the stance of the wings and the way they're connected. And then look at the bat. The bat is nearly identical in its construction. So the question is, and when you're thinking about mythology, it's like, wait a minute. Mythology is supposed to be completely fabricated, completely made up. How is it possible that they described the wings of dragons to be bat-like, and when you look at a pterosaur, it's nearly a perfect fit? It's very fascinating to me. So let's keep going. Here's a recreation of a Spinosaurus. He carries many of the characteristics of dragons. You see dermal spines, claws, legs like a lizard, head like a crocodile. Check out the barbed tails on this particular stegosaur. The features of dragons actually match those of dinosaurs. That's just a fact. We can see it. And this is Dracorex, which is a horned dinosaur. It is a dinosaur actually named after a dragon. The irony knows no bounds here. You see, the draken is the Greek word for dragon. And this is a reconstruction of the Dracorex fossil done by National Geographic. And the paleontologists who named this fossil were stunned at how much it matched the imagery of dragons. And ironically, they named this dinosaur after a dragon in the Harry Potter movies. The scientific name of this creature is Dracorex hogwartsia. Okay? I mean, again, the irony knows no bounds on this. Now, Carol Rose went on to say something else about the dragon that is quite notable. Those dragons were a common feature of legends and folklore from ancient times in virtually every culture of the world. You see, here's the thing, guys. Dragons are a phenomenon worldwide. It doesn't matter what continent you go to, these giant reptiles are spoken of everywhere. So the question is, how did cultures in, say, South America and cultures in China 2,000 years ago tell similar stories of creatures if they were all completely fictitious and products of pure myth? The Chinese and the South Americans weren't emailing each other. All right? Did virtually every culture of the world create the same mythical creature in which to fear? And what were the odds that supposed mythical feature matches the dinosaur scale for scale. You know, the legend is just the starting point. This isn't my argumentation yet. I'm just saying this is wild stuff. That this is all happening. Here's historical selectivity. Has anyone heard this term, historical selectivity? Okay. It's basically a term historians use, and it's very simple. It's you cannot record every last event. Okay? You have to be selective on what you write down. Now think. Historians or people telling legends are selective in what they're choosing to pass on. And now think that with one unified shout, the ancient cultures of all around the world thought it was important to pass down stories of big, giant reptiles. That's another interesting thing. How is it they all selected that and said, this is a big deal, we're passing these things down? It needs to be said, it is not only creationists who have connected the very large dots between dragons or dinosaurs. Because it happened before I was born, I think. The famed atheist Carl Sagan tried to rationalize away the dragon stories because of the obvious connection to dinosaurs. So this isn't just something that I am making up here. There is agreement on both sides. He said this, the pervasiveness of dragon myths in the folk legends of many cultures is probably no accident. It is a worldwide phenomenon. Sagan recognized the stories of dragons are remarkably similar to dinosaurs. And so he tried to offer an explanation for it. He tried to explain it away with an evolutionary worldview. And his proposition was essentially this, that we inherited memories of dinosaurs that are 100 million years old from our non-human ancestors. That we essentially reincarnated dinosaur memories, and then man, when they erupted in us sometime, man thought they were real, recreated stories of them, and passed them down as dragon legend. No one can make this up here. He goes, this is what he said. He goes, the R complex is functioning in the dreams of humans. The dragons can be heard hissing and rasping, and the dinosaurs thunder still. Listen, it is not... He was completely comfortable using the term dragon and dinosaur interchangeably. Okay? This is not... evolutionists have this picture of creationists that are kind of... and they're just wacky and they believe weird stuff. Listen. Atheists believe this. Evolutionists that are studied and researched understand what Sagan is saying here. And he's comfortable using the terms interchangeably. He went on to say, we may each of us be replaying the 100-million-year-old warfare between the reptiles and the mammals in our mind and our dreams. And that's where the dragon legends came from, according to Sagan. So the question is not really, do dragons seem like dinosaurs? But the real question is, why do dragons seem like dinosaurs? That's the question. Why? How is this even possible? Sagan thought we inherited memories, and that explains it. You can believe that at your own risk. Now, another idea that evolutionists have on why dragons match dinosaurs is from Adrian Mayer. They're coming out because they're addressing this because they know it's an issue. Mayer discovered that American Indians have stories claiming that their people in the past have encountered real living dinosaurs. Here's a quote from her book. Okay, and we're moving into oral history here, outside of legend. Okay, so we're moving from legend into actual oral history of cultures, the next part of our discipline. Navajo historian Vine Delory says there are dinosaur stories. Flat out. That's what she found, that's what I found. There are dinosaur stories. In fact, in my book, Dragons or Dinosaurs, I go into a number of the actual dinosaur stories of the Native Americans, and she does too. All right? Doesn't get more clear than this. Now, however, Adrian Mayer believes in evolution, so she believes that dinosaurs died out 65 million years before man. And so she doesn't doubt the stories are true because she found them. She knows the stories are true. They actually pass these stories down. But she questions, she doesn't believe them. It's like, well, that can't be true because they died out. So she's, again, trying to explain away these remarkable stories. And she wrote a book called Fossil Legends of the First Americans. And basically, to explain away the dinosaur stories in the American Indians, she created an elaborate idea called Fossil Legends of the First Americans. And her entire assertion in the book, and that's why I started out with the dinosaur dig, so you guys had some fossil understanding of how fossils are excavated. Okay? Her entire assertion in the book is that Indians, rather than seeing the dinosaurs alive like their history claims, really created legends of dinosaurs based on their fossils, finding their fossils, figuring out what they were, and piecing them together. Then the Indians made up real-life scenarios about the dinosaurs and told them as fables, and the fables got passed down mistakenly as real history. That is her claim. Now, for Mayer's idea to work, these American Indians, these Native Americans, would have had to possess wonderful skills of fossil excavation, an advanced understanding of paleontology 1,000 years ago that would have rivaled our paleontologists today. And then those Indians must have decided to never pass down that amazing skill set because paleontology is not in their history. Then on top of that, the Indians would have had to go against deeply held pagan beliefs just to accomplish this task. I'll show you what I mean. She quotes, she found it, she goes, some Lakota healers still warn people not to touch any fossil bones because they possess very strong medicine powers. How could the American Indians be avid fossil hunters when their pagan religions instructed them not to go touch the fossils? She goes, at Fort Belknap Reservation, one Ossabawan told me that many traditional people still avoiding traveling wherever fossil bones are obvious. So not only do they not touch them, they actually go out of their way to stay away from them. Mayer wrote again in her book, traditional Navajos avoided all contact with corpses in places where the spirits of the dead may be. Funeral practices also help explain why all kinds of bones are avoided. The dead were not deeply buried in the ground but left in the desert, which means that any bones one encounters might belong to ancestors or monsters. Since it is hard to distinguish animal bone fragments from human, it seems best to steer clear of any skeletal remains. And I'm not criticizing the Native Americans because it is tough to distinguish what it is that you're taking up. It's hard going. Okay? But if the Native Americans can't distinguish between animal bones and human bones and therefore decide to stay clear of any skeletal remains, then how in the world did they study dinosaur fossils so well and create elaborate stories of them? What's fascinating is Mayer's own research refuted her hypothesis in this, and she never saw it in her own book. Mayer provides a perfect example of how the faith of evolution distorts how you see the evidence, because the data was right there in front of her, but she needed to believe that dinosaurs were separated by man for 65 million years, that she couldn't see the clear contradiction in her own work. More oral history. The Australian Aborigines also have oral accounts of dinosaurs, and this is a picture that was drawn of an encounter that the Aborigines had with a creature. Now, if you look at it, that just looks like a plesiosaurus. And there's a little dude inside. Sorry about your luck. But did they just create this out of thin air? And how did it match, really look like a known dinosaurian creature? Plesiosaur is a sea creature, so it's classified a little differently. So we have basically two ideas of why, from the evolutionary camp, of why there are dinosaur stories and dragon stories. You have Sagan's reincarnated 100-million-year-old memories, or Mayer's ancient bone experts who are really afraid of bones. Those are the options they've given us. Okay, let me just say, I got a novel idea. Maybe they weren't lying about what they saw. That's all. They're like, this thing's amazing, I'm going to write it down. This thing's amazing, I'm going to tell people about it. I'm going to draw it. They weren't lying. Okay, they're smart, intelligent people. They weren't lying about this. They simply saw the creature. No need to believe this. No need to check your brain at the door to believe this. As biblical creationists, we reserve the right to state the obvious. Okay. Now, I know somebody is thinking, wait a minute, this dragon stuff is, okay, I get what you're saying, but what about fire breathing? Isn't that the big giant flying ointment here? Okay? I know guys are thinking that. Well, has anyone heard of the bombardier beetle? Okay, this little hot shot is something else. All right, he's got glands that he stores in his rear abdomen, and when he's under attack, these chemicals are stored quite benignly. All right, no harm to the creature. But when he's under attack, he shoots them out of these tailpipes, and they start to catalyze somewhat in the air, and they mix, and they reach 212 degrees Fahrenheit. It's fascinating. And they actually reach detonation. They blow up. And there's military applications because they're studying this little guy because man, that's really cool. He's blowing things up. He's called Bombardier for a reason. And his stuff actually produces charring. And so they did this test. I saw this test, not in person, on video. And they pushed this spider towards him. I'm like, spider, don't go. This is a bad idea. Okay? And they push this spider toward him, and boom, this thing happens. The spider flies back, and then charring, burning, is just charring the paper underneath it. So we have a creature that is alive today that reaches scalding temperatures, can create detonation, can create smoke, all right, and charring. So the idea of fire breathing is really not that big of a deal because naturalistically, it's not unrealistic. So when you look at the Leviathan and Job, talk about coals, smoke and fire, it's just not that big of a deal. Now we're going to move on to archaeology. All right, now what I want to see is that our legends are confirmed by the oral history. All right, so those two confirm each other. So what we're trying to do is connect the dots here and say, are they continuing, is everything going to overlap? Will everything agree with each other? Because if everything agrees with each other, we've done a pretty good search into this. Now we're going to archaeology. Did man leave behind artifacts of dinosaurs? In the year 1496, Bishop Bell died. Now, 1496 is a long time before 1822, when they supposedly discovered him. And he was buried in a tomb inside the Carlisle Cathedral in the UK. This is his tomb. And in the brass inlet surrounding the tomb, there are two creatures carved with their heads intertwined. Okay? There they are. Okay? Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in on the one on the right for you and place a sauropod dinosaur underneath it for comparison. Now, the head is worn off a little bit here, but this one I want to show you, and I'm not sure if it shows up on either of these. The tail, I want you to look at the proportions if you can. The ratio of the tail to the body to the legs, to the stance of the legs, the ratio of the body to the neck, the ratio of the neck to the head. Now look at the sauropod dinosaur. It's a dead ringer. It's actually a dead ringer. And it's beyond dispute because it's 1496. And it's it's carved in brass in a cathedral that they cover up with a rug now. You have to get special permission, and you may not even get it for you to look at this. It is an astonishing recreation of a sauropod dinosaur. How did they do this if they've never seen one alive? Because they're not doing the skeleton, are they? This is what I want you to understand. This is the girth. This is the flesh that you're seeing, not just the bones. So they knew what the girth was like of this creature. This is me at location. I am at Kachina Bridge. I'm in Utah at a place called Kachina Bridge. Because down there's a petroglyph, there's a rock carving, and it was carved by the Anasazi Indians around 1200 AD. Now, once I got down there, I climbed up on the face of the rock, because some people have tried to actually claim that this is not what we're saying it is, and they studied it with binoculars. So I was like, you know something, I'm just going to scale the rock face and get to it. And I'm going to put my hand, I didn't put my hand on it, but I put my nose pretty close. You'll see. That's me. I was really happy. Okay? Now, there's an image right here that I'm pointing to, and I'm putting a contrast to it. And this is exactly what this thing looks like. I'm just putting a contrast to make it pop out. That's it. Now, Fran Barnes, an authority on rock art of the American Southwest, wrote this years ago. There is a petroglyph in Natural Bridges National Monument that bears a startling resemblance to a dinosaur. I couldn't agree more. And do you know what's great about this? Go see it. Every single one of you. Go see it. Go to Kachina Bridge, go to Utah. It'll take you about 30 minutes to climb down into that gorge, and you will find it. It's under that bridge. When I went there, I went with a friend of mine. From the ground, we looked up and went, whoa, that's a dinosaur. So don't even take my word for it if you doubt it. Go see it. Now, in Cambodia in 1200 AD, there's this temple there, and this was carved on the temple. 1200 AD. There's no creature that we know of today that has a long tail and those plates going all the way down the back throughout the tail, except some sort of dinosaur-like creature. How did they know what this thing looked like? Where did that come from? It's very fascinating. So, and there's so many more artifacts. There's so many more artifacts, but I just wanted to show you a couple. Written history. So what we've seen is, okay, the artifacts match up with the oral history. The oral history matches up with the legend. Okay, we're starting to build an argument here. Here's the written history. Now, did you know that historians of great repute wrote about dragons and flying reptiles as matter-of-fact creatures? Here they are. Herodotus, the Greek historian of 400 BC. Flavius Josephus, Jewish historian, 1st century AD. Pliny the Elder, Roman historian, 1st century AD. These historians are not purveyors of myth. If you know your history, these are the heavyweights. That's why I'm using them. These are the heavyweights, and this is what I quote in my book. Both Pliny and Josephus actually talked about a strategy, both of them did, about releasing the ibis to deal with flying serpents. It's fascinating. This is Josephus's account, and I start geeking out over this because it's an extra biblical account of Moses. Moses while he's still living in Egypt. And this is what Josephus said. For when the ground was difficult to be, a little bit more background, Moses is leading an army down into the Ethiopian region. That's what the background of this is. That's the history behind it. For when the ground was difficult to be passed over because of the multitude of serpents, which it produces in vast numbers, some of which ascend out of the ground unseen, and also fly in the air, and do come upon men at unawares, and do them a mischief. He said, Moses invented a wonderful stratagem to preserve the army safe and without hurt. For he made baskets like unto arks of sedge, and filled them with ibises, and carried them along with them, which animal is the greatest enemy to serpents imaginable, for they fly from them when they come near them, and as they fly, they are caught and devoured by them. Listen, flying reptiles were very prevalent, so prevalent that Moses had a strategy to deal with them. However, in that area, this idea of flying reptile, man, they should have been extinct for millions and millions of years. That creature should not have been flying around at that time. Now, read Pliny's account, and I love this account, from the Roman historian. This is what he said. Ethiopia produces dragons, not so large as those of India, but still 20 cubits in length. Now, okay, are we to assume that he's measuring a mythological creature with a cubit? And then he's saying, well, the creatures in India and Ethiopia, they're of different size. He goes on to say about what the dragons eat. He goes, the contest is equally fatal to both. The elephant, vanquished, falls to the earth, and by its weight crushes the dragon which is entwined around it. Here's what's fascinating. This is what I found. I found a legend. I found written history. I found oral history. I found a cave carving. Okay, 4 examples in my book of dinosaurian-like creatures attacking elephant kind. All right? One is, Pliny. I got a cave carving in France. We have a legend that comes out of Ethiopia area. And then we have North American Indian stories about giant reptiles attacking mammoths, elephants. Now, are we to assume that they're all make-believe and they choose the exact same creature in which to feed upon? See, understand, I think it's self-evident. Let's keep going. Paleontology. Now, so we've oral history, written history, legend, archaeology, they're all confirming each other. It's just not that big of a deal. Man knew about these things. What about paleontology? What about modern day science? Okay, does paleontology agree with the stories? A few years ago, a Tyrannosaurus Rex was excavated from what is called the Hell Creek Formation in Montana. It wasn't that far, a few hours, maybe a little bit longer, but it wasn't that far from where we were excavating Big John. It was all Montana. Now, this creature was special because it was not completely fossilized. It was still largely bone. It was bone. Yet the paleontologists who found it thought that it was over 65 million years old, and they couldn't get it out of the site. And they did something that's kind of unthinkable, but they had to, is they sawed this leg bone in half to fly it out by a helicopter just to get it out of it. And when they got it back to a lab, and they looked at the interior of the bone, this is what they found. Of this supposed T-Rex that was 65 million years old. Tissue, blood cells, protein fragments, soft, flexible, resilient tissue that when stretched returns to its original shape. This creature wasn't even done decomposing. All right? My friends, there is no way that is 65 million years old. Flesh decomposes. There's no way that is even 65,000 years old. All right? But what has happened? All right, the evolutionary community has looked at that, and they've done the same thing Adrian Mayer has done. They've looked at the evidence and go, wow, I guess flesh can last 65 million years after all. In fact, Jack Horner, Mary Schweitzer is the doctor who discovered this. Mary Schweitzer, I personally invited to be on the Dinosaur and Dragons documentary. She very quickly declined. I was like, come, prove your point. If you believe that 65 million years old, I'll set up a camera, and you can tell us all how it is. She said no. And Jack Horner, who she got her PhD under, told her, and this is documented in secular science research, do whatever you can to prove they're not red blood cells. Okay? And so they started calling them red, round microstructures. Guys, this is hard evidence that supports the biblical timeline. This is hard evidence that does confirm the oral history, the written history, the legend, the archaeology. When you start adding all this together, the answer is very, very simple. But here's the thing. Was this a one-time thing? No. Because now scientists from around the world are like, well, that's weird. We're going to look at some of our other bones. In May of 2009, blood tissue extracted from a duck-billed dinosaur bone. Happened again, and then again. 80-million-year-old mosasaur fossil has soft retina and blood residue. Retina? Are you kidding me? 80 million years old? The faucet is being turned on. The evidence is overwhelming. The evidence is overwhelming. Now, in my second talk today, all right, I'm going to do all dinosaurs in the Bible. Everything. I'm usually not afforded 2 times to talk on dinosaurs and dragons, okay? So I'm adding this to this because my second talk, come see dinosaurs in the Bible. If dinosaurs are a product of evolution, where is the evidence of dinosaurs evolving? This is a big deal and it needs addressed, and we're going to take the opportunity right now to do it. Let's not forget that it's not enough for evolutionists just to claim 65 million years ago they died out. I want to see how they evolved if they're going to make that claim. I want to see the evolution. What are you talking about? If dinosaurs are a product of evolution, show me the evidence. In the journal Science, this was a chart put forth to demonstrate the nice and neat dinosaur evolution from few creatures into many. All right? So down here at the bottom, there's a Dinosauria thing. And out of Dinosauria, all of these lines came. And they've made this chart. You know, and that chart shows dinosaur evolution. Now, here's the problem with this chart, is that it is filled with what is called ghost lineages. All right? A ghost lineage is an evolutionary term. I'm not calling it, it's their term. Is shown in the evolutionary ancestral tree when there is no evidence supporting the evolving lineage, aka transitional figures. All right? Now, what is worse, that the evolutionary lines are hypothesized, or it happens so often, they actually have a name for it. Now, Dr. Rob Carter gave me this chart, and on it is highlighted all the ghost lineages. So do you want to see it? Here it is. The red lines show the missing hypothesized connections, and the blue lines show large gaps in between so-called evolutionary ancestors. So can you see those colors? All right. If you don't believe in ghosts and you take away that, this is what the chart is left with. That's it. That's the chart. So someone might ask me, you know what it looks like? It looks like they're all created according to their kind. But that's just me. Okay? Now, someone may ask me, okay, Derek, are you just claiming these guys are just making stuff up? Are you claiming they're just making stuff up? I'll tell you what. I'll let the evolutionists answer that for you. Adrian Mayer, who did all that work on dinosaur paleontology with the American Indians, says this about the paleontologist she was interviewing. She said, seeking visions might seem light years away from scientific inquiry. Yeah, it might. Yet the most creative paleontologists can be described as visionaries, and many respected scientists have described important theoretical breakthroughs that came to them as revelations while they slept or daydreamed. What an alarming paragraph in a book published by Princeton University Press. Okay, this should be highly offensive to anyone that has taken the word of paleontologists as fact. If you believe they're telling you hard fact, I don't blame you for being lied to. But this is what is going on in this world. She goes on, just in case she wasn't clear enough. She has this hyper-aware dream state is called lucid dreaming or power dreaming by neuropsychologists. Paleontologists who trust their dreams about the meaning of fossils are perhaps not so unlike Native American discoverers of fossils during vision quests. Those guys were on peyote. Okay, understand what a vision quest was. Certainly, she goes on, certainly paleontology, solving the mystery of stone creatures that will never be seen walking the earth, inspires dreams and theoretical narratives. Guys, theoretical narratives is a fancy word for making things up. Now, do you realize that the paleontologists are the ones responsible for providing the ancestral line of evolutionary theory? They're the ones to say, this creature evolved into that creature millions of years ago, which turned into that one, which turned into that one. Yet this respective book from Princeton University Press saying a lot of these guys got key breakthroughs in their dreams. Now, in contrast, how detailed is our history found in the Bible? This is a timeline constructed from the Bible with Jesus represented at the bottom corner. Okay? The Bible gives us a detailed timeline from Jesus all the way back to Adam. Right? With names, with ages, it's incredibly detailed. Researchers love this kind of scholarship. All right? It is the opposite of the evolutionary ancestral trees. The opposite. Imagine those dashes and then those arcs at the bottom. Now I'm going to tell you what this is. This is a piece of art that was awarded an honorable mention by National Geographic in their 2008 International Science and Engineering Visualization Challenge. The name of this piece is called Visualizing the Bible. All right? The graph, now remember what I told you to think about. The graph shows the Bible's 1,189 chapters plotted along the horizontal axis at the bottom of the image. So those are the chapters of the Bible. Each one is a dash. Okay? And then the arcs above the graph show the 63,779 cross-references between each chapter. Okay, the stunning interconnectivity of scriptures led one of the artists to say it almost looks like one monolithic volume. Yet over 40 authors were used to write the 66 books of the Bible. How did they accomplish this kind of thing, this kind of continuity thousands of years ago? It's not humanly possible. My friends, if you know your Bible, if you've studied it, if you've researched it, you know that there is a supernatural stamp of engineering on it. It carries the indelible stamp of the divine Word of God. And is so much more powerful than what the evolutionary world is offering up to us. And there's no possible way I'm ever going to sacrifice this for the ghosts, lineages, and the dreams of scientists. May God bless you.